Okay, today is November 19, 2013. This is Forensic Interviewing of Children, and we are beginning a new section now where we take a look at forensic interview protocols. This is a 3-week module, and this is my first lecture. I am not going to talk about the other interview protocols that are out there. We are going to touch upon them eventually, and you have readings that talk about the variety of interview protocols out there. Nevertheless, as we have learned from day one here, it is quite a challenge to conduct a forensic interview with a child. It is quite a challenge to get information from children for a variety of reasons. And we spent the entire semester looking at all of the challenges that children present. We looked at their cognitive issues, the way they look at the world, how they think about things, right? We looked at their linguistic challenges, how they use language, how they perceive language, how we can make our language simpler and more concrete so that they understand us better. All of that stuff was designed, all of that studying was designed to learn as much as we can about the myriad challenges that children present when it comes to asking them questions about past events. And protocols are designed to encourage children to give us the most information and the most reliable information they can while respecting their abilities and their development. And there are quite a few protocols out there in the wild nowadays, and many of these protocols are similar in their major aspects. It is in some of the details that they differ. And, I would argue that the details in which they differ are minor. I wouldn't say they're insignificant, but they're minor. There is the John Yule Protocol, there's the Stepwise Protocol, there's the APSAC, or the American Professional Society on the Abuse of Children has a protocol. The state of Michigan has a protocol that's codified. And what I mean by that is it's in their code, it's in their book of laws, the Michigan Protocol. So if you're up in Michigan, you're going to be using the Michigan Protocol. And it's a protocol that's designed to get the most information and the most reliable information from children. The National Institute of Health has a forensic interview protocol. And the protocol that I favor, the protocol that I have embraced throughout my career, is this Finding Words Corner House Protocol. And you may hear me and you may see the readings refer to this protocol as Finding Words. Sometimes they'll call it the Corner House Protocol. Sometimes they'll call it the Child First Protocol. Those three descriptions are synonymous. They refer to the same protocol. Finding Words is the Corner House Protocol mostly, and I'll explain that in a moment, is the Child First Protocol. The protocol which I'm going to teach you about, the Finding Words Child First Protocol, the protocol that I'm going to teach you about had its origins in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area of the state of Minnesota. And that's where there's a not-for-profit called the Corner House. And it was affiliated with the large hospital in Minneapolis-St. Paul. And I forget the name of the hospital. I was there last October. But some 15 years ago or so, a protocol was developed out in Minneapolis-St. Paul, and it was utilized by this not-for-profit child interviewing facility called the Corner House. And I was in there too, and it's not on the corner. I'm not sure. I envisioned this place that had the corner of a block, but it's not. It's kind of in the middle of the block unless they moved or whatever. But in any event, Corner House is a not-for-profit. It's not a law enforcement entity. It's not a child protection or DYFS of Minnesota entity. In some ways, I never even knew it had a hospital affiliation until I was there in October. I I thought they were truly and completely independent from any particular discipline, that all they did was forensic interviews. But it appears as though they had their birth at the major hospital in Minneapolis-St. Paul, at least a strong affiliation with that hospital. But it isn't, for our purposes, it's an independent forensic interview facility. And Child Protection, DYFS of Minnesota, brings their kids there in major sexual abuse cases. Not all kids in all cases. But they bring kids there for forensic interviews. Kids who may have been abused, may have been sexually or physically abused. Law enforcement, the police departments, the prosecutor's offices or district attorney's offices up in that area of Minnesota bring their kids who may have been maltreated by their caregivers to the corner house. Hospitals, they go to the corner house where they have a kid who presents as perhaps being sexually or physically abused. So it's an interview facility for kids who may have been maltreated, and it is truly a multidisciplinary location. So all of these entities bring their kids to the corner house for a forensic interview. It's not the only game in town. Even in Minnesota, there are, and is, at least one competing protocol that I'm aware of up there. Kids can go get interviewed by professionals using that protocol as well in the state of Minnesota. But the protocol that I want to share with you is the corner house protocol. And in the late 90s, 97, 98, the National Association of District Attorneys in Alexandria, Virginia, decided that they wanted to use the corner house protocol as a forensic interview protocol for prosecutors around the country. They wanted to create a model protocol that was useful in criminal investigations, in cases where the child's statements may be used in criminal court, and concomitantly, along with that, in civil cases as well. But because this is the Prosecutors Association, the National Prosecutors Association, the end game here was to have a respected protocol that can be used as a model for interviewing kids throughout the nation by law enforcement, prosecutors, if you will. So in the late 90s, they created a partnership with Corner House in Minnesota. And a man named Victor Veith, who's from a small county in Minnesota, was one of the supervisors at the National District Attorneys Association. In fact, he was the director of one of their subunits called the National Center for the Prosecution of Child Abuse. And he was the principal person who came up with this idea to use the corner house protocol as a model, a template, for prosecutors' offices around the nation, if they so were interested in that protocol. However, the corner house protocol was a three-day training. And the prosecutors at the District Attorneys Association wanted to make it more experiential. So in this new partnership, which they dubbed Finding Words, in this new partnership, they decided that it was going to be a 5-day training. And the last 2 days were going to be experiential. And by experiential, I mean you're going to interview real kids, not who have been abused, but kids about a non-abusive event that the training designed. Now, we do it in New Jersey. We've been doing it in New Jersey for over a decade. Typically, the kids see a Mr. Science or a Ms. Science, or they go see somebody who's got animals, or they go out on a field trip, and then the children come, and the students question the children about the field trip. And they're usually first or second graders, just like I asked you to interview for Learning Project 1. We pay the tab for the first or second graders. They go to this activity. The students or the participants for Finding Words will have had 3 days of lecture and discussion, and then on day 4 and 5, the first thing they'll do is interview these kids. They'll come over, they'll share some pizza with the kids, they'll experience this event, and then they will be interviewed by the participants. Only 40 participants or less, because it's hard to manage. You can't have 100 participants. It would be unworkable. So the limit is 40 students. And each one of those 40 students, has someone in here taken Find the Words? You didn't take it? The participants will interview the child in their breakout groups. Typically the groups are broken down into 4 breakout groups of 10 each. And participant 1 will interview the child, and the other 9 will observe, and then number 2 will go, and the balanced 9 will observe, and so on, until everybody interviews a child. After that, the project has actors, professional actors, that have been trained in child abuse and neglect. They have familiarity with how children experience abuse. They read Summit, they read Finkelhor, and they read Sorensen and Snow, the things you read in your 2 weeks of how children experience abuse. These actors are well trained in how kids experience abuse so that they can portray abused kids, and they do a fantastic job of it. We pay them rather well, and they deliver. And you know, the participants typically are a little awkward, and they giggle and joke about it, and they think that it's going to be goofy, but it's not goofy at all. These actors are really good, and when the participants eventually interview their actors who are portraying abused kids, nearly all of them agree that that was a really intense experience, and it was hard for them to separate the fact that this was just an actor. They really get emotional, the interviewers, interviewing these actors, because they're that good. And it works the same way as the children who were interviewed. The 10 participants, participant 1 goes, you interview your kid, who's the actor, number 2 goes, and we have anywhere between 5 and 8 actors for every training. So everybody gets a different kid. Sometimes the same actor will portray 2 children, but you know, they dress in different stuff, and they look different, and they present as different children, and it works rather well. And then the last day, there's an examination, and you know, you pass or fail. If you fail, you remediate the situation. You may have to take parts of the course over again, or the course over again, or you pass, you get a certificate that you've completed Finding Words. The training does take 5 days, as I said, and that was a major change from the original 3 days that Corner House had. And the National Prosecutors Association felt strongly, you know, as do I, and I think this is what separates this training from all the other trainings. You know, these other protocols, they differ a little bit from what I'm about to teach you, but in no major ways. But it's in the training that I think, you know, we have the edge. And it's the experiential aspect of it at the end that makes this protocol so defensible and withstand scrutiny from anybody who might suggest that it's less than optimum, less than ideal. The other thing is the protocol's research-based. So everything we do is based upon the latest research in the field. In fact, we are reformulating the protocol as I speak. My colleague Giselle, who you've seen a number of times, interviewing kids, and if we ever get the speaker in here, you'll see some more of her. She's out in Minnesota right now, learning the latest changes in this protocol. So it's empirically supported, that is, it is research supported, it's rigorous, intense, it starts at 8 in the morning and it ends at 5, you eat lunch at the facility, you don't go anywhere, and eventually we hope to find a facility where you sleep at, almost like a boot camp for forensic interviewers. You know, at the end of the week, you pass or fail. And the goal there is, when you're on the witness stand, you will have credibility. You know, Finding Words, in 98 and 99, not too many people heard of it. It had no, you know, no public awareness at that point now. But now it's been mentioned, even in New Jersey, in at least 2 or 3 Supreme Court decisions. It's been cited by the Supreme Courts of many states throughout the country. It is the interview standard in 24 or 25 different states throughout the U.S., as well as Colombia and Japan. And at my last national meeting, conference, we had representatives from Japan and Colombia who were at the training, the national training. I'm sorry, you had a question?
Yeah, I was wondering about that. What type of trainings they have here in New Jersey?
What was the question?
What type of trainings they have, like that, like the one they were doing in Corner House?
Yeah.
Do they have any type of trainings like that here?
Well, that's what I'm talking about. We have Finding Words New Jersey, where we do the exact kind of training that I'm describing here. We've been doing it since 2002. There are other protocols out there. There's that Michigan one, there's the National Institute of Health, there's the John Yule has a protocol, the Stepwise protocol called Narrative Elaboration. The APSAC, the American Professional Society on the Abuse of Children, has a protocol. Those entities have trainings as well. Some of them will come to your state if somebody pays, prosecutors or DIFAS or someone else. Excuse me. But most of them you will go to where they're conducting the training. If it's in Kentucky or Kansas or Maine or New Jersey that particular year, they'll have a training and you can, I'll take that. You can go to that training and get trained in that protocol. In New Jersey, the Finding Words protocol is free and it's offered 3 times a year. It's multidisciplinary, but you have to be someone who interviews kids. We have psychologists who don't interview kids. They really can't take the training. We often invite them as observers. But if you're a psychologist or psychiatrist or mental health professional who does interview kids, then you can take the training. Out of those 40 students that I described, there are, has everyone signed up? 10 are from law enforcement, 10 are from child protection, okay? 10 are from prosecutors' offices, and 10 are from mental health. So if Middlesex County wants to send people to be trained, it has to be a team. We don't take 4 cops from Sayreville. We take a team of 4 people from Middlesex County, or more, depending upon that particular county and how many people have been trained or need to be trained. So you need to send at least 1 DIFAS worker, 1 police officer, 1 prosecutor, and 1 mental health person. And then you can have maybe an extra prosecutor, an extra mental health, or you can have a bigger team, but it has to have the core members of the disciplines I described: mental health, prosecution, law enforcement, and child protection. And then it's free. And the one that we do in Middlesex County just passed, that's in October, and that's done at the Sayreville Fire Academy. The one we do in South Jersey is in Cumberland County, and that's at the Cumberland County College at the Luciano Center. The one we do in northern New Jersey is right here, Passaic County, at the Passaic County Public Safety Complex. And again, it's free for all participants. The hope is that one day we get a facility where, it'll have dorm rooms, and the people who get trained will sleep overnight and stay at the dorm rooms. Now, seems like a lot of work and a lot of stuff going on just to interview kids. But it really is that important. The cases rise and fall on the quality of the interview when it comes to child abuse investigations. And years ago, if you look at that Margaret Kelly Michaels case that we looked at, and you saw the video from back in the 80s and 90s, a lot of what we did, when I say we, child protection professionals, did back in those days was flawed. And it resulted in perhaps abusers going free, and sadly, abusers never being detected. Because we didn't know how to interview kids. I mean, if most kids...
I'm here.
Okay.
I'm like too comfortable.
I'm a little tired here. We learned that most kids deny, right? I'm watching The Wire season 4. What a great show on HBO. If you've never seen it, if you like police shows, there's no show that's done any better than The Wire. And if you got HBO, you can go on the, their past episodes, and they have all 6 seasons. And that show really, really gets it right. But one part of The Wire and many of these shows, what they demonstrate is the police culture. The police culture is used to, you said it didn't happen? Okay, why are we here? Next case. And you can't approach cases like that. You can't interview a child, and if they say it didn't happen, close down the investigation. Now, that doesn't mean that if a kid says it didn't happen, then ergo it did happen. No. You need to know about how kids experience abuse, how they tell, how they express themselves, to size up kids and figure out whether this denial is a true denial. And that shouldn't be the end of the investigation. You need to probe further and find out as much as you can about the child's home, their life's experience, their development, and most importantly, who they first told, you know. They are at the center, being interviewed for a reason. We don't go around interviewing kids who've never said anything about being abused. So in nearly all cases, the kid has told someone else. So the fact that they go to law enforcement or they go to the prosecutor's office and they deny shouldn't be the end of the inquiry. Yet many years ago, not even many years ago, some years ago, as recently as the late 80s, early 90s, that was the end of the case. You know, when I first joined the unit in 1992, I would read grand jury transcripts. They called the kid in, the kid said, oh, it didn't happen, kid, no bill, the grand jury did not file charges. Next case. We had grand jury prosecutors who weren't trained in what I've been teaching you all semester. Now, in Children in Justice, you learn more about the criminal justice process, but essentially what happens is, when someone's arrested, their case goes to a grand jury. It's 23 people, and they sit and they listen to the evidence, and they decide whether the case is going to go forward. Okay? And they base it upon the evidence that a prosecutor presents in secret, a grand jury proceedings in secret. And if a kid comes in and says it didn't happen, the grand jury would decline to file charges. The original arrest is dismissed. That's the end of the case if you call it a new case. And I remember reading many files, because we get the transcripts, where cases were disposed of in that manner. So how many kids have gone undetected? Undetected because the system didn't know what they were looking for. Well, we now know what we're looking for, okay? And I'm sharing with you all semester what we're looking for. And it is critical that we know how to question kids if we want to make sure that there's justice in New Jersey and justice throughout this country when it comes to maltreated children. And that's why there's so much involved in this training, you know? That's why it's experiential. That's why you fail if you don't do good, and you pass if you do good. You know? That's why we spend 5 days. That's why I want you to sleep over. It's that important. And when you take the witness stand, I want you to have, when I say we want you to have gone through, okay, a process that has credibility. That the system and law enforcement, and most importantly the judiciary, the judges of New Jersey, have respect for. We've reached that point, I can proudly say. We've reached that point. Finding words, child first, is totally respected throughout the state by our judiciary. So when you take the witness stand, number one, you're testifying, you are authenticating a video of a child's interview, and you are expressing to the judge and the jury that you've been well trained once you mention those words, finding words, New Jersey. And they know, the judge, the jury not so much, they don't know anything about this stuff, but the judge knows, and the system knows, and the major players in the system know that finding words is rigorous, that this person knows what they're doing. Does that person make mistakes? Sure. Does that mean every kid we interview we do a great job with? No. Does that mean sometimes we interview kids and we get it wrong? Yes. I mean, that's just the nature of, you know, of being human.
Professor?
Yes.
For your unit, is there like a certain amount or people, professionals that you utilize on a normal basis to interview these children?
Well, that's a good question. I have, in our county, one interviewer, and that's Giselle. At one point, I had two interviewers. I had Giselle and Fran, and you see Fran from time to time on the videos. Essex County has an interviewer, a go-to interviewer. I had hoped in the late 90s, early millennium, that this concept of forensic interviewers would be embraced by my colleagues throughout the state, but it hasn't been. The people who benefit the most from this are the most suspicious of it. And, you know, in my county, you know, I had developed a certain amount of goodwill and respect, and you know, my offices have supported me. But not so in other counties and other communities. And, you know, you need somebody who's passionate about it, who's into it, and markets it and sells it. So in answer to your question, some counties, very few sadly, have a steady, go-to forensic interviewer. We happen to be blessed to have Giselle, and sometimes we had Giselle and Fran. That doesn't mean you can't do it the other way. What other counties do is they train their detectives in this protocol. And those detectives, you know, if they're 6 or 7, you know, they each catch a case, you can build up a lot of experience. No one's saying a detective can't do a good job. And when I first introduced this concept in Passaic County in 1997, there was a lot of pullback, a lot of blowback. People were like, fortunately my boss supported the concept. But the people who were most against it were the detectives. And, you know, their view was, what do you mean I can't interview a kid? You know, are you saying that we don't know what we're doing? No, I'm not saying you don't know what you're doing. What I'm saying is these are special kind of cases involving special issues. And it is ideal if we have someone who's highly trained to do these interviews so that we can do, and we detectives can go investigate the typical law enforcement aspects. And a couple of things that I argued to my boss at the time that it does is, it results in a more objective process here, because the theory is that the forensic interviewer is neutral. He or she goes in there, they're just interested in being respectful of this child and this child's abilities. They're highly trained, they get experienced very quickly. They don't have as much of an investment in the outcome as the detectives do. Think about it for a moment. I'm Detective Del Russo. First thing is the kid makes a statement at school. Okay, let's go ask the lady at the school who the kid made a statement to questions. We get those questions. Wow, she's really good. She said the child was crying, that she didn't want to go home. This seems like a real good case, right? We go interview the mother. The mother's going, I don't believe her. She's a little whore. Oh, this mother's a POS, man. I got no use for her. Well, we're going to take a statement from her anyway. Bring the girl in, right? She sits in the waiting room. We bring the target in, the suspect, the dad, the uncle, the cousin, the coach, whoever it is. We interview him for 2.5, 3 hours. He denies it, he denies it, he denies it. He says the girl's a liar. She's making it up against me. I still believe the kid. I believe in the case, right? I have declared him a bigger POS than the mother, okay? I can't stomach to look at this guy, right? I believe, listen, we're supposed to be objective, but any detective, anybody who investigates stuff makes up their mind at a certain point. Can minds be changed? Sure. I mean, that's human nature. You're gonna draw some conclusions right away, whether you think you got something or you don't got something. And the thing is, if you're the case detective, and it's your case, and you were interviewed 4 or 5 witnesses already, you got a huge investment in this case, and you feel strongly about it, especially this kind of case. You know, there's no case in all of the criminal law that arouses more emotions than the criminal investigation of child molestation. None. None at all. Okay? So when you go interview that child, are you objective, man? You just came out 20 minutes ago from spending 2.5 hours with a guy that you think is a total scumbag, a guy who molested a kid, right? Are you in any position to interview this child and go through that delicate process, being objective and neutral, even-handed, cool-headed? Now, can you pull it off? Yeah, but it's a challenge. It's hard, okay? And you want that kid to make a good statement because you know this guy did it, and he disgusts you because he's sitting 100 yards away, chained to a wall on the other side of the building. And whether he gets to go through the process of fingerprinting and go into jail depends upon what happens in that interview room. It's not an ideal person to do the forensic interview. It's just not. So that's one thing, that's one benefit that you get from having a steady child forensic interviewer. Is that person part of the same working group? Yeah. You know, is Giselle work with the same detectives that have come to these conclusions? Are Giselle's emotions aroused by the fact that this child was molested and the bad guy is 100 yards away? Of course. Nevertheless, she hasn't gone down to the house where people live. She hasn't put people in a car. She hasn't gone through that whole process that can certainly skew her emotions and impact upon her objectivity. You know, and there's a lot of other good arguments that I'm not going to go through now for having a forensic interviewer. In the counties that use detectives, one way to deal with what I've just described to you is to have someone different from the case investigator do the forensic interview. So if Del Russo's the investigator, then Heath will do the forensic interview. Another member of the detective staff will do the forensic interview of the child, not the one who's assigned the case. Excuse me. In any event, so, you know, you have this protocol. It's designed to reduce the anxiety of the interviewer somewhat, because a protocol is a structured process. It's something that the interviewer can rely on to conduct the interview of the child and do it in an even-handed way. It is liberating in some ways for interviewers. I remember when I first started that interviewers would go in there and just start some freewheeling conversation with the child, some stream of consciousness dialogue with the child. Little or no structure to it. Yeah, they knew they needed to know who, what, when, where, and how, all that stuff. But how it came out varied from interviewer to interviewer. You know, and how they dealt with challenges that they were confronted with during the interview with the child varied tremendously. So a protocol is a way to create some uniformity in the interview process, and also a way to allow the interviewer to have a bit of structure to rely upon when they are in the interview room. Even a novice, fresh out of finding words training, will feel some degree of comfort when they go in there, because they know they have to do this first, and that next, and this next, and this is how it ends. Okay, now the child's going to throw you all kind of curveballs, but we teach how to deal with curveballs, and there are very few we haven't encountered yet. So it is liberating in a way for the child interviewers. You know, back to the detectives. I said in 97, 98, the detectives were upset. They're not really upset, but they didn't like the fact that this person was coming in and they're going to be doing all the interviews, and wow, we're not good enough to do the interviews. You know, that's police work. They're not sworn officers. I mean, I heard every argument you can imagine about why they should still be doing the interviews. Well, eventually that culture changed. I mean, that group of detectives, they were good detectives. Some of them are in leadership positions, and I respect them. They felt the way they felt. You know, they all moved on, and a new cohort came in, and they've come and gone, and a new cohort came in, and they've come and gone. You know, and by the time the third cohort came, nobody knew any other way than the way that we do it in Passaic County, that you had Giselle and Fran. That's the way you interview kids. And to give you the punchline of this whole thing, in 2007, before the economy really got rattled nationally, the local Passaic County economy got more than rattled. There were layoffs in every department, including the prosecutor's office. Major layoffs throughout the prosecutor's office. I lost Fran and Giselle. All the interviewers were laid off because they had a certain title that had legal significance, and if they were kept on, you know, our office may have been vulnerable to lawsuits and all this stuff, so they were gone. Well, you know, I didn't know what to do. And you know what the detective said? What are we going to do? We got to interview the kids. That's unfair. We're going to file a grievance. We shouldn't be interviewing the kids. There should be a child interviewer in here. You know, from 97, when we're the only ones who could do the interviews. In 2007, they go, you mean we got to do the interviews? This is outrageous. You're making the detectives do the interviews. Now, I'm overstating it. But they weren't happy about it. You know, they weren't happy about it at all that they had to do the interviews. Now, you know, we picked up and we began to do the interviews, and you know, through some efforts, I was able to get Giselle back within a few months, and that's where we stand now. The detectives are trained, and Giselle does the bulk of our interviews. But you know, back to the protocol itself. It was a way of liberating the interviewer and giving them something that they can rely on when they go into an interview that is forensically defensible, and that has research support. And if you ever wind up in a courtroom, that's what protocols are also about. You can defend it by saying that you use this particular protocol and it relies upon the latest research in the field. So, we have to bear in mind, though, that there is a school of thought that believes in blind interviews, and I don't, and a protocol is the antithesis of a blind interview. A blind interview is, where the interviewer doesn't know anything about the kid or the case. And they just go in there and interview the child. Now, I can imagine that there are some blind interviews where there's some kind of protocol, but it's pretty hard to have a protocol or a system for questioning children if it doesn't allow for information gathering at the beginning of the protocol. Now, can someone tell me why they think people prefer a blind interview where the interviewer doesn't know anything about the case or the kid? Why do you think that might be a good thing? Go ahead.
Well, that way the interviewer can basically not be biased and be able to have be neutral.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. The assumption there is that the interviewer is more likely to be objective and neutral, and the only thing that knowledge about the case can serve to do is influence the interviewer in some way and undermine their objectivity. But that is at great expense. We know that we don't only interview children, we interview this child, right? And this child has a particular personality and a particular set of strengths and weaknesses and a particular abusive experience, okay? So the more we know about this kid, how this kid thinks, how this kid views the world, how this kid was abused, who abused this kid, right? The more we know about that kid's particular abuse history, their family dynamics, their level of development, their level of cognition, their mastery of the English language, their ability to express themselves, the better prepared we are to sit down across from this kid and communicate with them. Going in there blind is a colossal disadvantage. And, you know, I believe in, and this protocol, the Corner House Finding Words protocol, is an informed interview protocol. It's one where we believe strongly in information gathering about the kid and the case. All right? So, the first place I want to start off with in teaching you about this protocol is with the case intake. Your interview starts way before you sit down with that child and begin the process of discussing the case with them, okay? Well before that. Your case begins when you learn how that child disclosed for the first time and who they disclosed to for the first time and the manner in which they disclosed to that person the first time. We call that witness, that person, the fresh complaint witness. Okay? Open quote, fresh complaint, close quote. And every case in child protection or law enforcement has a fresh complaint witness. It's kind of related to what we talked about last week, the accidental or purposeful disclosure. The kid told somebody before they got to your doorstep, right? We were analyzing it, relying upon Sorensen and Snow last week. We were analyzing it from the perspective of, was this something that the child offered up because they wanted some kind of intervention? Or was this something that was accidentally disclosed, something that the system stumbled upon for a variety of reasons? The kid was caught telling a playmate about what happened, or the kid was masturbating excessively, or the child had written something in her diary and mom found it. You know, an accidental disclosure. We were analyzing how that information got into the system with regard to whether it was accidental or purposeful, because that's something that would help us in our forensic interview. The fresh complaint analysis takes that thing many steps further. We don't only look at accidental or purposeful, we look at how the kid disclosed, what was the language that the child used, what was the reaction of the caregiver, or what was the reaction of the person who got the information, you know, what was the relationship with the person who got that information and the child. The typical scenario is the child goes to a social worker in the school for whatever reason. In the episode of The Wire I was watching a couple of hours ago, there's a boy who's about 12, maybe 11, and his mom's drug addicted, but he's basically a good kid. He kind of was taking care of the family and his little munchkin brother that he would bring to school every day, and then he comes home and he goes, What's that noise upstairs? Oh, Daddy's home. He got out of jail. Mom, you lied to me. You said he was never going to live in this house again. No, things are going to be the way they were in the past. Well, later on, they cut to the school scene, and the teacher can see that he's upset. And he's saying, what's up? Something you want to talk about. The boy doesn't respond. And he says, maybe you want to go talk to the school social worker. And, at the point I am in the show, he says, there's a long pause. And he says, nah, and he doesn't go. But that scenario that The Wire had in their scene that I watched earlier is very typical. Kids disclose to the school social worker, the guidance counselor, or maybe a gym teacher or someone that they know and trust all the time. That's not the only kind of fresh complaint witness we get, but that is a typical one and the one that we see often. So for our purposes, I'll probably refer to the fresh complaint as the guidance counselor or the school social worker very often, okay? And that would be an example of a fresh complaint. If that boy sat down with the social worker and at some point during that discussion he disclosed that his father would fondle him, we're going to want to interview that school social worker about a variety of things, including what brought the issue up, what did the boy say, what were the exact words he used, what was your response, the guidance counselor or social worker. When he told you that, what did you say? What did he say back? What about the non-offending caregiver? Did we contact mom? Did she come to the school? If she came to the school, what did she say when she arrived? Don't you be lying on your dad now again. Not a good welcome, right? If her response was, don't lie about your father, that's the first response that she makes in the guidance counselor or social worker's office. That's something that we want to know, right? This boy had chosen to tell now, and the one person that he has some care for in the world arrives at the school and is discouraging him, or worse yet, branding him a liar before he even got out what he wanted to say and that he already told the social worker. So you want to analyze that process. Before they got to your door, who did they tell? How did they tell? What were their emotions? Okay? What was the response of the person who got the information, the social worker? What did the mother say? What did the non-offending caregiver say? Typically the mother. How did they respond? Who else was in the room? Was there other people in the room? Was the school nurse there? Or did you go usher the principal down there? One of my pet peeves for 20 years, has been this process of disclosure within the schools. And I have, spent the better part of my career trying to intervene in that process so that the schools don't muck it up. And the first 3 years of my career, I would go from school to school. I brought some of my staff along, and they went from school to school. But, we barely got through Patterson before all of the school staff changed. We had to start over again. We never made it through Patterson. There were so many schools that it took the better part of 18 months just to get through like 1/3 of the schools. And we go out to the schools and say, here's what you do. When that kid goes to that social worker, in the hypothetical I just described to you, here's what should happen. Don't bring the kid to the school nurse. Don't go call the principal. Don't call the kid out of class in front of all his classmates. Bring him into a closet somewhere and talk to him there. Go ahead.
A fresh complaint witness is only a social worker or guidance counselor, or is it the type of disclosure?
What do you think? What do you think?
It's a person, obviously, fresh complaint witness.
Well, give me your definition. Give me your definition of how you would characterize generally. Forget about licenses and social worker and all that. What kind of person do we mean generally? Who is the fresh complaint? I'm going to make you answer your own question. Who is the fresh complaint?
Well, going of what you said of counselor, of school counselor, guidance
No,
counselor.
forget about school counselor, okay? Who is the fresh complaint, generally speaking?
The first person this person discloses to.
Stop. The first person the child, the kid, person disclosed to. Freeze frame. Who could that be in a child? Exactly. So it's anybody. Who's the first person the child disclosed to? You answered your own question.
Okay, so if it was his buddy,
Fresh complaint.
okay.
If it was some big kid on the corner, fresh complaint. If it was his auntie, they're watching a program together about abuse, and he starts crying, auntie says, "What's up? I don't want to talk about it." Eventually it comes out, auntie's the fresh complaint.
Now, if
Could be anybody in the whole wide world.
anybody, and then they can have obviously like dual categories, like if I disclose to you,
Yeah.
then you would be the first fresh complaint witness, and it would also be categorized as intentional because you are,
Yes.
okay,
What?
right?
Yes. What's your first name again? Sorry.
Carla.
Carla, right?
Uh-huh.
Carla's saying the fresh complaint can be anybody, the person that the child decides to tell for whatever reasons. And once we know who that person is, we can look at it through another lens, that is, well, did the first person they tell, did it come out as a purposeful thing or an accidental thing? Because the kid on the corner, he might have just been going, "I ain't going home no more. My father's a creep and a douchebag, and I don't want to go." What's the matter? What's up with that? He's always touching me. He don't want nobody. He's just telling his friend, blowing off steam. Girls sometimes tell other girls, or they might tell a relative, and they don't want it to get out. So kids can disclose, often to age mates or friends. A lot of referrals we get from girls who tell their boyfriends when they turn 15 or 16, or whenever they start dating or become sexual. You know, the girl will tell her boyfriend, or the girl will not want to have sex, or tense up, or not be open about it, or not like some particular thing he does, or whatever. And the boyfriend will be like, "What's this all about? How come you don't want to do this? How come you don't want to do that?" "Oh, I can't tell you." And they'll disclose because, they've been damaged in some way. Their father has sexually abused them, and then when they're in an intimate relationship, the damage that was caused by their father or uncle, whoever the abuser is, manifests itself in some way. So the girl will tell the boyfriend, and then the boyfriend will go, "You got to tell somebody." "No, no, 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 no. We're not telling anybody." "No, you have to. You have to tell somebody." And we get them that way too. They come in, and they'll go to the teacher, or they'll go to the principal, or they'll go to their mom. We get neighbors' moms. Now that kid doesn't know. He's a 16-year-old boy. "Mom, my new girlfriend Danielle, blah, blah, blah. She doesn't want to tell anybody. What's the right thing to do?" Now the other mom will go, "I'm going to call her mom." That's not good for law enforcement because then the thing gets out of hand. But it happens. I can't control that. We can control what happens in the schools to some extent. When a kid tells the guidance counselor, we can control that in some way if we properly train the staff at the schools, right? How to deal with that information. But the girlfriend who tells the boyfriend, and the boyfriend asks mom, his mom, "My new girlfriend Danielle was molested by her father. What do we do, Mom?" That mom, they don't know what to do except to say to themselves and to their son, "This has got to be reported. This isn't right." That'll typically happen. That mom, when we get those kind of cases, will do the right thing. But the right thing to them is to call, unfortunately, most of the time, the girl's mother. And now the cat's out of the bag. Maybe the mother knew. Maybe the mother was, Jane Doe's mother. Right? You all know Jane Doe now. What do you think Jane Doe's mother would have done if she got a call from Jane's boyfriend's mother at 16?
They're lying. They don't know what's talking.
Exactly. Says if you know her, simply by reading that account of her molestation as a child. She would tell that mother, "She's lying, that's not true. Thank you for telling me. He's a good boy. I'm so glad that he brought that out, but that didn't happen." They have she'll finesse it some way, as they say in politics. She'll spin it. It'll get spun. So, but that boy would be a fresh complaint. Would that disclosure be accidental or purposeful?
Accidental.
Very good. You say that with confidence now, and that's great, because it's clearly accidental. Because the purposeful disclosure is when the kid tells somebody with the expectation that somebody's going to do something about it. I was trying attempted murder once with a guy It's a love triangle. Bobby D'Amelio. He says to his cellmate, somebody's been sleeping with my girlfriend. And he's a Patterson cop. And he hangs out at Paul's Bar down on Perks Avenue, which I used to go at the same time. Oh my God. I got to deal with him. His cellmate says, you want me to cap him for you? D'Amelio goes, yeah. You'll do that? You'll kill him for me? Yeah. So they cut a deal to kill him. The guy was my friend, the cop, Phil Perone. You're going to kill Phil Perone. Fortunately for Phil Perone, and unfortunately for Bobby D'Amelio, the other guy in the jail cell was a guy named Mike Gibilio. And Mike Gibilio was one of the most infamous informants in the history of the United States. He had informed on the Irish Republican Army, on the sale of Stinger missiles. He had informed on men who were going to murder a judge in Florida. He had informed on Russian jewelers in the Diamond District. And he wound up in the local county jail with this guy, Bobby D'Amelio. Next thing you know, that we put a wire on him and we got D'Amelio, setting up the hit. What I'm driving at is when I was trying that case, because I keep drinking this coffee, I had a big glass of water, a big tumbler full of water. I was doing what I'm doing right now. And then I asked about 20 questions. I drink another glass of water, and the judge said, "Frank, tell you stop drinking that water. You're going to make me have to go to the bathroom," the judge. And I was drinking the water. Every 10 questions, 15 questions, I had another glass, and my throat was dry. But anyway, I digress. So yes, the fresh complaint is the person that the child tells that got the case rolling. And we can always analyze that disclosure, if you will, based upon whether it's accidental or purposeful. Because it matters. It matters when we do our interview. And, all of the stuff that I'm talking about now is related to the information gathering phase of the forensic interview. I started out by saying, at least this part of the lecture today, I don't like blind interviews. I believe in the informed interview. And the beginning of the informed interview is knowing who the kid told and how they told, and what the reaction was around that telling, if you will, and whether it was purposeful or accidental. We need to deconstruct that thing from top to bottom before we even sit across from the child. Because that'll tell us a lot about that kid's pathology, how they feel about stuff, how they feel about telling, and whether they're going to talk to you about it before they ever get in the interview room. Unfortunately, we don't always have that much information. But it is incumbent upon us to try. My detectives sometimes go, well, she doesn't live in New Jersey, the teacher. She lives in New York, and she's not home. She left school already and went up to New York. We can't get her in till tomorrow, but we need to interview the kid today. Well, I'm like, well, they invented something 100 years ago, telephone. Call her on the phone. It's not ideal, but let's find out what she can tell us about the process of disclosure, on the phone. Let's get as much of that as possible. We'll bring her in for an exhaustive, far-reaching interview another day, probably tomorrow. But let's not interview the kid without knowing something about how the kid told. Call her up. The boyfriend scenario, the boyfriend, go get him. They don't have a car. Pick him up. Send a squad car. Send a detective's vehicle. Bring him over. If you got to call him on the phone, you call him on the phone. But this part of the investigation is critical. And, I started saying that it had become my mission when I first joined the unit to try to teach teachers how to react properly to the child's disclosure within the schools. And, while it was extremely difficult to go from school to school for a variety of reasons, in the mid-millennium, we had some grant money, and I said, let's make a video, a DVD, where we can give it to the teachers. Because what happened was I made a do's and don'ts, one-page document that told the teachers what to do, what not to do when the kid goes to the social worker and says, oh, my uncle comes in and fondles me. What not to do, and what to do. Do tell the child it was okay to disclose. Do tell the child that they're not in any trouble. do not call the parent or the mother unless you call DIFUS or us and talk to us about it. Because schools would do that. They call immediately, because they're putting this through the wrong prism here. And when I go out and talk to them about these things, I make this distinction for them. Because 99% of the time, something bad happens to a kid in the school, the first person you call is the parent. I've gotten those calls. My son, his kid fell in the playground, somebody hit him in the head with a football, whatever. Call your head. Oh, come, I go there, mellow him out, make sure he's okay. If he's got to come home, I go home with him. You call the parent. Not this kind of case. You don't call the parent. Well, they're not the one who did it. It's the uncle, the boyfriend, Yeah, but they're related to that person. They love and trust this person. They live in the same house with that person. We don't need that person to know what's up. That's how investigations work. Okay? We leverage ignorance. What people don't know is our advantage, especially the guy who did it. I don't want him, it's usually a him, could be her. I don't want him to know we know, and I don't want him to know how much we know. So, schools, one of the things they would do is call the mother. One of the don'ts is don't call anybody, call us. Don't call anybody, call us. Don't march the child down to the nurse's office. You know what I'm talking about, right? Don't march the child over to the principal's office. Don't pluck the child out of the classroom in front of all their classmates. Wait till there's a break between periods. If that child told the social worker in period 1, and in the middle of period 3, somehow, little Joey Del Russo, please report to Principal Jones. Everybody's going to go, where'd you go to Principal Jones? What's up with that? They'll make something up. Who needs that scrutiny from your peers, right? Who needs that? Wait till the period ends. If that kid who just got done telling, within an hour has this negative event happen, how do you think that makes him feel about cooperating in the future? Not too good, right? The words barely got out of his mouth and he's being embarrassed in front of his peers. These are the simple things, but they're things that people don't think about because that's the way they do things. There's no disrespect to the teachers. There's no disrespect to educators. No, they don't know what they don't know. And so I try to communicate with them, try to teach them, what the right thing to do is. And I tell them, look, one of you, this is going to happen to. Not all of you, but one of you. Sadly, maybe more than one of you. One day, when you least expect it, some kid's going to come to you and tell you that they've been sexually or physically abused. And you're not going to know what to do. Thankfully, now you do know. I'm going to tell you what to do. Here's the do's and don'ts. So I publish them on a piece of paper. I hand them out. Give them to the school. Give them to the principals. Wallpaper the Passaic County with them. It never really worked too well. Some of the schools that we interacted with, that we went and did trainings and we handed these things out with, when the kid told in a school that we had visited and gave the flyers out to, outcomes were a lot better. I didn't do a study and I don't have empirical research. I only know anecdotally that I would say, I read a statement and go, oh, the teacher immediately called us and she didn't take her to the school nurse and she made notes about the exact words the child used. I go, guarantee you that's a school we went to. We look it up. Oh yeah, John F. Kennedy High School. We went there. So anecdotally, the outcomes were better. But in 2007, we made a video. And I had 1,000 of these DVDs in my office. So instead of the paper thing, I give out the videos. You got to watch it. They're not going to watch my video. They'll watch it when they screw up. When they bring everybody in and they call the mother and the guy runs to Sicily and we lost the case and the child, because they didn't manage the information well, we give them a parting gift. Here's a disc. Don't let it happen again, okay? So then, about 18 months ago, there was money available again, and I got this idea from the ethics training that Montclair State gives you. Why not take the video and put it online? And why not cut a deal with the educators in Passaic County, with the district superintendent, and all of the superintendents throughout the county, where they will make this part of their in-service training. They always have in-service trainings on a variety of things. The hot topic of the past 2 years is what? Get a guess, you get a candy. What's the hot topic in education that we have to be careful with, and there's all new protocols about when kids do these kind of things to other kids? Bullying. Bullying. Bullying is hot. I'm not in the bullying business, but there's lots of people in the bullying business now, and there's lots of money for bullying. Somebody at the door? And so they have these in-services to talk about bullying one week, and this is important stuff, to talk about teen pregnancy another week. You know, they talk about in-service. Teachers have different training. Why not make this video part of in-service, put it on the internet, have a username and password, create a database where we can know who we train, categorize who we train, watch the video, and because people can put on the video and spin around and watch The Wire, make them answer 15 questions. They're gimmies. They're easy questions, but you can't answer them unless you watch the video. They're not that easy, right? Why not show the video, answer 15 questions, and as Napoleon once said, and I'm totally paraphrasing, but it was something to this effect, 1,000,000 men will march for you and die for you for a single piece of ribbon. What he was saying was, you give a guy a ribbon, a little medal, and they'll do almost, and give him a little trinket. Everybody likes a little reward. I remember we were teaching Daniel how to use the potty, and give him a little star, he would do it better. And if you didn't give a little star on a little chart we made for him. So at the end of this, when they're done and they answer all 15 questions correctly, they print out a certificate. And you use that old English font. It looks very formal and official, and a watermark in the back. Anyway, that's what we did. So when they're done, they click it and they get a frameable certificate. All from the comfort of their home, right? And the idea is to have everyone from maintenance to the district superintendent to do this. Because kids tell anybody and everybody, okay? Sometimes they do tell the gym teacher. Sometimes they might tell the maintenance worker. Sometimes they might disclose, to a volunteer social worker that isn't in the employee of the school, that's only there for the last month. So everybody should take this. And anyway, they've embraced it. I'm doing it right now. It's the first time we've offered it, and it's a little chaotic now, and I keep getting, hundreds of emails every day from people taking this at Passaic County Tech in different schools. But in about a month or so, I'm going to look at the data and see what schools haven't done it and what schools have. And I bring this up because I'm supposed to be talking to you today about forensic interviewing of kids and how to prepare for that forensic interview. Well, this is part of it. I'm doing it on an institutional level here. I'm trying to intervene in, I'm trying to get into the room where that kid discloses in a virtual sense. Right? When that kid tells the social worker, or the gym teacher, or the school nurse, or the principal, or whomever they tell, because most of our cases come from schools. They're the ones who report this stuff, right? I can't control it when that kid tells, but if we educate them about the right things to do afterwards, I can kind of wedge myself, metaphorically into the room with them. And most of the time they would march the kid to the nurse. The kid says something, okay, we have to go to the nurse. Tell her what you told me. The more the kid tells, the more problematic it becomes. First of all, they may say something differently, just a little bit differently. Just a little bit differently is fodder for the defense, for the people who say this never happened. Well, you told the social worker this and you told the nurse that. You must not be telling the truth. You made inconsistent statements. The other thing is, the kid says to themselves, why do I have to say this again? Didn't you blank me the first time? What's the blank? When I told the social worker in some detail that my uncle comes to my room at night and molests me, you brought me to the nurse and made me say it again. Didn't you blank me the first time? What's
me? Or do you?
Believe me the first time. Didn't you believe me the first time? Okay? When somebody says to you, you have to tell it again, you start to think that maybe they don't believe you, okay?
Especially a child.
Especially a child, right? But that doesn't end there. Where the nurse and the social worker go? Don't say it, because I know you know. You're an expert. The nurse and the social worker are going to go to some other person's office, usually a dude, but not always. The principal. Tell the principal what happened. Before they get to child protection or law enforcement, the kid's told the story 3 times already. Okay? Can't be good for the case. And they may have said things a little differently all 3 times. The risk of someone seeing them or hearing about it is far more significant now. Far more likely that one of their friends saw him going from the nurse to the principal, from the social worker. The risk of identification and exposure is completely enhanced. So, and that's a different kid. The kid who went through what I'm describing, the different marching, saying it differently, asked questions by 3 different people, 3 different people's reactions, that kid has to process, oh my God, I know your uncle, I play golf with him, I know your mother, are you sure? Even people who are trying to be nice can say things that impact the child negatively. And it doesn't matter how you say it, it's what you say and how you say it. We just got to be sure. Are you sure? Damn right. How could I not be sure? What kind of question is that? Because he can get in big trouble. Like, he had a sense of that, or she had a sense of that, but now it's becoming a fact that this person's going to get in trouble because of what he has to say. So the more people that interact with that kid, the more likely there's going to be something said or done or some behavior engaged in that discourages the child from expressing themselves about what happened. So, the more that we can educate the educators, and that's what I call this thing, educate the educators, the more that we can educate them about what to do and what not to do, the better shape we'll be when you sit across from that child in the interview room. So, what you need to do is gather information. That's what we're talking about. And I've been talking about this fresh complaint at length. We've examined it from a number of different perspectives. Here's a form that I modified from the Corner House and made it for Passaic County. Everything's made up. Excuse me. But this is the beginning of information gathering. And when the child comes with whoever brings her to the interview center, the interviewer and a detective will speak to the caregiver, the child's caregiver, and gather the following information. And this is about getting set up for the interview. This is what is the informed interview. Nearly every part of it's designed to let you do a better job interviewing this child. Because we need to interview not children, but the child. I've said that statement in a variety of ways throughout this semester. So our one shot at learning who this child is in this process right now. We don't know this kid. We just found out about it because at 1:42 in the afternoon, she told her guidance counselor. And now she's in our office with somebody who knows her much better than we know her. So, we want to know the child's name, date of birth, sex, standard stuff. Has this child or another family member been here in the past? As we say sometimes in a related inquiry, is this family known to DYFS? Doesn't have to be DYFS though. Are they known to law enforcement? Has this kid disclosed or been molested by someone else? It happens a lot. Not most kids, but some kids, sadly, have been molested by a different person or maybe the same person. So you want to know that. You want to know, you're dealing with 2 different kinds of kids. If this kid has been molested by someone else or this kid's never been molested. You want to know that up front, right? It makes a lot of sense because, a kid who's already been molested once is going to feel quite differently about talking to you than a kid who's never been molested. And why? Well, here in this case, the answer is yes. The next question is, what happened to that case? If that case was processed in a way that the child perceived negatively, then you may have a problem, right? If that case was processed or dealt with where the outcome was a positive one for the child, then you may have a more cooperative child. And I hate using the word cooperative because it's not a lack of cooperation, but you may have a less challenging interview. In this case, the matter involved a sibling and was closed due to insufficient evidence. The father spent a day in jail. That's not good news for you, the interviewer. It's news you want to know. It's news you ought to know, but it ain't good news. Why is it not good news? Somebody tell me why. Come on.
Maybe it has to be a history.
Listen, you're going to interview this girl. We just learned that her sister made an allegation in the past. Imagine it's a purposeful interview. She wants an intervention. She wants to stop. She wants whatever. Punishment, at least to stop most of the time. Let's see what the relationship is between her and the perpetrator. That's not on this page. We'll get there. Okay, it's her father. Her sister was molested by her father. And her sister came to the authorities and said what happened to her. And her sister had a case opened in her name. And what happened to the case? It's thrown out. It was closed. Her sister didn't get justice. Not only that, what happened to Dad when her sister told? Went to jail. So when this girl comes to your office, do you think she's more likely or less likely to tell you what happened? What's that? She probably won't disclose, or she's going to be a difficult interview. Because, listen, kids, the thought that someone may go to jail or Dad may get in trouble is all very abstract to most kids, okay? It's not going to happen to me. They wouldn't put my dad in jail. I just want it to stop. You can see how a kid might process that in that manner. If they've never been through the process before, they might, he might just told the girl, oh, I could go to jail, or, they may have a sense, a very strong sense that Dad may go to jail if I tell. But again, it's very abstract to them. Is the notion of father going to prison because of what she says abstract in this girl's case? Yes or no? Is it abstract? You know what abstract means?
Contradiction doesn't happen.
Yeah. Her sister told, and they took away her dad in the handcuffs. So this is going to be a more challenging interview, right? Than the average kid. Because it's not abstract at all. It's as concrete as it gets. If she's concerned about her father going to jail because of a disclosure about sexual abuse, okay, she knows that that's likely to happen because it happened with her sister's case. So you're going to have to be tender with her. You're going to have to make that child feel comfortable during the interview, and you're going to need to deal with that. How? Well, you'll deal with it as it comes along, and we'll talk more about how to handle challenges and blocks a little later, but I'm talking about the information gathering phase. A blind interview won't know that. Blind interview doesn't want to know about the kid or the case. Doesn't want any extraneous facts. Kid's address, city, county, phone number. Whoops. Who is the child's caregiver? Okay, the mother. Mother's address, it's the same as the child. So it looks like the mother and the child live together. Don't assume that. This child and mother live together. Father's name is Pat Ho Wan. He lives on Prospect Street in Killington. Now, is that the same address that the mother lived on? Let's see. Jones Street in Killington. Okay, we need to follow up on that. Is that is that because he was removed from the house because of this case? Is that because the parents are estranged or divorced? And that matters. Sometimes kids may disclose to their counselor and then to their mother, and if the father's in the house, not in the house, and he's divorced from the mom, that child may feel safer and less at risk because he doesn't live in the house anymore. Or he may live someplace else because that's where child protection moved him to, or he had to, upon the agreement of with child protection, he was going to go stay at that address. So we need to infer things from that, and we don't even have to infer anymore. We can ask mom. But he doesn't live at the same address, and that is material and relevant. That's what I'm driving at. You need to know why. Why is he there? Is he a dad who lives in an intact family? The child is going to respond one way. If he's a dad who is estranged from the caregiver and doesn't live with the daughter who was molested, then the child may be more likely to express herself. She has 3 siblings, 11, 7, and a little one. We don't know if he isn't a little one without an age. Any developmental disabilities or delays? Dyslexia. Okay, difficulty reading. That may manifest itself in your interview. It may not. If you write something on the board, you should be aware that the child has difficulty reading. Where was the child at the time of the referral to the Child Advocacy Center? 7416 South Broad Street, Trenton, New Jersey. Apartment of the paternal grandparents. Whoa, what's that all about? What might that be about? Why might the child who disclosed be at her grandparents' house?
Because they don't want to be at home with the molester.
Maybe. Help us out, DCP&P.
Mom thought probably maybe it was placed.
Right. Why would the child? What if mom doesn't believe the child? What do you all do?
More likely to removal and take it down to the grandparents or a relative or parent.
Yeah, what's your first name? Nina? Nina says, who works for DCP&P, she says, look, you got a kid who comes in, and then you communicate with mom about what happened. She says, there's no way this happened. She's a liar. It didn't happen. My other daughter said it happened. She made up lies, and she's following the same footsteps as her sister. Now, DCP&P goes, listen, Mom, think about it for a minute. Can't you just even entertain the notion that it could happen? Do you think? No way it could happen. No way. He's a good man. He's an honest man. Now we're starting to say, hey, this kid's not safe. Because this guy's not arrested yet. He's going home tonight. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. We don't know.
His parents placed the kid with, not her parents.
What's that?
They placed the kid with the parents.
Well, his parents. Whatever it is, the kid's not home, right? They were his parents. His parents could be, maybe her parents are unavailable. The thing is, and I don't know that she was placed anywhere. I'm just drawing inferences here. You're right. It's the paternal grandparents.
Right. That makes it even more difficult.
Yeah, assuming he's an adult male.
Because they don't believe it. I don't think they would want to believe that their son was.
They may be more likely to agree that their son is innocent than the maternal parents. But my point here is the child is not in the home with her siblings, her mom, in the neighborhood where her playmates and classmates are. The child, upon disclosure, was moved. And that don't feel good. So one thing that DCP&P will do, now Mom, we ruled her out, at least in the short term. And like I said, sometimes we'll go to Mom, geez, can you imagine? No. All right, this kid is not safe with Mom tonight. And maybe for the future, who knows? But tonight, we got to make sure this kid's safe. She ain't safe with Mom, that much is clear, because Mom's not buying it. And she's emphatic, calling her daughter a liar. Not safe. Got to make sure the child's safe tonight and in the future. Maybe maternal grandparents are available, maybe they're not. Maybe paternal grandparents are, you never know. But paternal grandparents might go, oh, he's got problems since a kid. We believe her, we trust her, she's my treasured granddaughter. So somebody made a determination, at least in the short term, that paternal grandparents are going to keep her safe. I'm more concerned with the fact that the child is not home. And the reason I focused on that was it says, where is the child right now? She ain't home. And we're drawing inferences. Maybe she went there on a ski trip. I don't know. We're drawing inferences now. A very common scenario, though, is the child's placed somewhere else until things settle down and until we feel the child's safe. And we want to know that. And we want to follow up on that. That's why that question's on there. The question is on there to find out what happened to the child after she told. And from the child's perspective, she could be placed in a home full of rose petals and cushy clouds and beautiful music. It doesn't matter to her. All she knows is she ain't at home anymore. And if she ain't home anymore, what might she think about telling? It was a bad thing to do. I told what happened, and they plucked me out of my family home. Sometimes the dad gets to stay in the home. Not in this case, because she got the 3 other kids here in her prior. But if she was an only child, sometimes the dad stays home. Mother doesn't believe the kid, calls her a liar and every other thing under the sun.
So is this child?
Child's not safe. I'm staying with my husband. He pays the bills. You guys are dumb and stupid and falsely accusing him. Okay, well, your daughter's sadly is going somewhere else tonight and maybe for the near term. Who knows? Till this thing gets fleshed out. In that case, the kid not only is moved, but the bad guy isn't moved. Even more troubling, right? Yes.
It's probably, you're probably gonna say that. Well, my question was, what if the child was not placed with any relatives at all, but they were placed with a foster?
Happens all the time.
Does it increase the likelihood that the child is going to get their confession when they're with strangers?
Yes, I wouldn't exactly call it a confession, but their disclosure, yeah. The likelihood of recantation is increased when negative things happen to the child. Let's look at it that way. And being plucked from your family home, where you've lived for your entire 11 years, and placed in the house of strangers, is a risk factor for recantation, and a super significant one. Excellent. Excellent. Even with paternal relatives, there's a stigma associated with that. Not as much as foster parents. And that happens all the time. Not all the time, lots of times. Most moms play lip service, and you kind of get through that first night. But some moms are very adamant they're not going to believe it for 1 second, and the kid goes somewhere. And you want to know that. See, you asked me, is that a risk factor? So it's a risk factor for recantation. It's also a risk factor for denial, for minimization. Maybe she doesn't recant, but guess what? It's going to be like pulling teeth when you go interview her. And, well, I don't remember. It only happened once. You know what? I was kidding. I didn't tell her that. I didn't tell the counselor that. She's saying it bad. She's saying it all wrong. You're going to get a song and dance and all kinds. It's going to be a difficult interview.
But would you interview the child there in that environment?
No, you're going to interview the child. You're at the Child Advocacy Center now. You're never going to interview the child at the scene of the crime. The only people who interview the children at the scene of the crime are the Division of Child Protection and Permanency. I'm not picking on you.
But also,
Do you know that? That DIPUS interviews children at the scene of the crime over and over again.
like I remember in the.
But sometimes that's all they can do. So we got to grant it to them. At least we're out there. But it's so sad. Dad, you go in the kitchen. I'm going to take Danielle up to the bedroom.
I have a question. In the meetings when I forgot, but I guess in the Fowler book.
What's that?
I guess in the Fowler book when I was doing my meetings prior learning unit, it says that when you interview children, the environment should also be warm and conducive.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that you can have the most, I guess get the most from the child.
Yes.
So if it's there at that center,
Yes.
is that warm or is that a?
Well, yeah. I mean, look, is it perfect? Yeah. Well, that's why we designed child advocacy centers for that very reason. Right down to the color of the wallpaper. Green is the best. Yes, I don't mean to jump around. Yes, I mean, look, it's as good as it gets. Depends. Some counties don't have enough money or they don't have a separate facility. We try our best. What's critical here, ideally it would be warm and it would be comforting and the wallpaper would be green and there'd be pictures of every culture on the wall. All those things would be there. These are the ideals. I teach the ideal. I mean, it's nothing. You got to teach the ideal, right? You don't teach less than the ideal. But not everybody can achieve the ideal. What's critical here is not so much that stuff, warm and inviting and green and all. I want the ideal. I want that if I'm designing from the bottom up. But what's critical here, and the most important, is that they're interviewed in a neutral place. Then we can worry about the wallpaper and candles and all that. But yeah, you need a neutral place. You got a neutral place, that's cool with me. Not neutral is the scene of the crime, and the family home is the scene of the crime. But we can't get past that in child protection, just the way it is. You know, you work way around it. There's very good workers out there that try their best. And if we can, we try to bring the child to a neutral site. You know, when I was first trying to get an advocacy center, we have a gorgeous one in Totowa now. But when I was first getting one, I wanted a freestanding building. I wanted it to be like an old Victorian house, and the kids come in, and you know, and then they offered me this brick building downtown Patterson, which I thought was kind of cool, and I kind of liked it. It certainly was in the city, and a lot of our cases arise out of the Patterson area. And that didn't work out. But I still had my eye on the little house, and we had a house in the beginning, a little Cape Cod. But I wanted a bigger house. I wanted to have more rooms and more things, and be a bigger center. And eventually, my last boss said, listen, we're buying this giant building in Totowa. It's in a light industrial section of town. And I'm giving you the front of the building, and you know, 10,000, 20,000, whatever it is, square feet. And you're going to like it. You're not getting a house. I'm like, all right. And I thought about it. Perhaps you call it rationalization. I said, you know what? First of all, our kids, you know, I'm picturing this beautiful Victorian home. That ain't their house. They don't live in beautiful Victorian homes, most of our kids, right? Control-Alt-Delete. And more important, as I thought about it, than what it looked like from the outside was how it felt on the inside. And while it's, you know, somebody in my office put 2 giant badges on the outside of the building, and I almost fell out of my chair when I saw that. I didn't want that. I don't, building this lot, I got 30 people with me. There's hundreds of people that work there. They're not going to change the whole building for Del Russo. But there was not necessary. The other thing is we have informants that come there. We get informants go talk about some drug kingpin. Like, oh, shit. Oh, bring them around the back. Why do we need those things there? This building should be nondescript. But even barring that, it's a big rectangular building, and you know, it doesn't look like someone's home. And you know, a lot of these kids don't come from a home that looks like the home that I had envisioned in my mind to begin with. And the more and more I thought about it, the more and more I felt that what was critical was what it looked like and what it felt like on the inside. And I think we did a good job of making it a nice, hospitable, child-friendly place on the inside. And that's key, you know, I think. It's key. You want, number one, for it to be neutral, and you want it to be child-friendly. And you thought you were going to learn about forensic interviewing and how to talk to kids. I haven't said a word yet about how to talk to the kid when you crouch down or you sit in a chair. Not one word. But the past hour and a half, I've been talking about forensic interviewing. I had a friend once who was he was in the television and video business, and he worked for the Knicks, the Seton Hall, for the all big sporting events. The pinnacle of his career was the Olympics in Atlanta in '96. And I would go, hey, Joe, you want to do this today or that today? You want to go for lunch? Oh, no, man, I'm working the Knicks game. Joe, the Knicks game's at 9 o'clock tonight. I'm there at 10 a.m., man. Pre-production. Planning, preparation, the setup is critical in any endeavor, right? Once the game started, he just turned on the camera and sat down, you know, and the other guy operated the camera, and he set up the wiring and all that. Pre-production, preparation is critical here, and that's why I've been doing a lot of talking, not about how to do the interview, blah, 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 back, blah, blah, blah. We'll get into that. But the setup is critical too, right? Gathering information is critical, and I want to emphasize that. And, you know, this is the standard form that we use. Anyway, I didn't even get through the whole form, and I'm a little tired of talking. It's about 5 to 8. In any event, do you have any questions for me about things we talked about this evening?
I have a question. I don't know if it pertains really so much.
I'm listening.
Is there a very high demand in forensic interviewers? Because it didn't sound like